Hi guys, it's Sophie. So I wanted to talk through the reading that I've done from the Gillette prize. I've now read the whole long list, which I'm very happy about, and these are the books I haven't already spoken about. So I did a video a little while ago reviewing, I think it was 5 of the long list, and this is the remainder of the long list. So I will have read all the shortlisted books, and I'm going to just chat through briefly the outcome of the shortlist and what I think my own personal winner from the shortlist would be. But we'll go through the books first. So the first one I have is My Darling from the Lions by Rachel Long, which is a poetry collection, kind of very modern. I didn't resonate with this poetry collection that much, though I enjoyed the process of reading it. The one I kind of have most in my head was called, I think it was called Victoria Beckham and the Sharks, or The Sharks and Victoria Beckham. I'm trying to find it now. I nearly read that one out to Tom actually, but let me just check. I'm sure that was what it was called. Yeah, The Sharks and Victoria Beckham. But this is fairly friendly poetry, I would say. Does talk a little bit about sex and relationships, but I didn't find it that memorable overall, though I did find it enjoyable. So that's kind of as far as my thoughts go on My Darling in the Lions. The next one is another poetry collection, and this is probably my favourite of the poetry I read. I really did like Poor though as well. I ended up going to an online event with Caleb Femi, doing a reading and talking about his poetry, and I think that helped me explore it a little bit more and how he works with surrealism and stuff, and that was really good fun. But this one is probably my favourite one. I think one of the things I enjoyed so much about this was it was kind of talking about how reliant the UK is in terms of healthcare and Filipino people and Filipino labour, and the impact that has on people of the diaspora, the kind of connections that people make within certain industries in the UK that are kind of filled with people from a specific nationality or kind of location in the world. And I think the kind of images of caring for someone that doesn't care about you, they stuck with me really well. So Antimatic for Homesickness was definitely my favourite of the poetry collections. I did like Poor, but I think this is the one that I would say would stick with me. Whereas My Darling from the Lions was kind of a nice experience when reading it, but not something I've thought about too much since. Then RE Desire was one that I felt was quite prickly to me as someone that didn't have information or background about the Desi culture, whereas Antimatic for Homesickness at the end has some notes about what are the terms used in the poems, and it has a list of words and what the implication of them is. By contrast, got a bit blurry, hang on. By contrast, there's a FAQ for colonisers, basically. It's people like me, so it was saying coconut is a fruit that should be thrown at traitors. Habibi is a word that once a beautiful Arab man called you. Kiran, a name for female Indians that Shah Rukh Khan stutters on. Mango, an attempt from the diaspora to connect to a homeland they cannot recognise. It definitely was not trying to draw in white people, which I definitely am here for. I think there's probably too much work that goes into trying to make us comfortable. But because of that, I kind of as I was reading the poems, felt like I was kind of being pushed away, which isn't bad, as I say, but I think I found it challenging to get my head into it without feeling like I was kind of trespassing into a place where I didn't belong. And I think that's a really interesting experience to have with a poetry collection. It doesn't mean I didn't enjoy it, but I think it's important to kind of recognise that I felt it was a space that was being expressly created and held for people that would benefit from it, and I was not one of the people that would benefit from it. So that was kind of my broad thoughts on RE Desire. Then the last non-fiction from the prize is Are We Home Yet by Katie Massey, which is a memoir about basically a young girl who comes back to her home, discovers her mother is a sex worker, and has to live with this knowledge and live up in this kind of challenging family environment. She goes off to a boarding school and just doesn't fit in and experiences like racism when she's at the school and feels like her mum's kind of keen to get her away, but she has this really strong connection with her mother, like covering for her almost in terms of her lifestyle. I just didn't like get on with it. Like I didn't enjoy it as much as like I can talk about it and kind of sell it, if that makes sense. Like I can imagine people would like it, but when I was reading it I was like, oh, it must be nearly done yet, which is really sad, because I think it's the only book on this long list that I didn't feel like thrilled to be involved in the whole way through. Back to fiction again, we have A More Perfect Union by Tammy Huff. This is a story about a romantic relationship between a black woman who is a slave and a white Irish man who is a blacksmith on the plantation where the lady who's a slave works. I can't remember either of the characters' names, I'm afraid. I read this really quick, and I do have to say I kind of struggle with like romance slave narratives. I don't know like how appropriate I feel they are, and like I just always find something a little bit icky about it, like the idea that you can kind of excuse what the majority of white people are doing for the actions of one or two people who are doing so because they have a romantic attachment to one person. Like it's not like this man was going out of his way to help everybody. That said, it's a really well written book and it read really quickly. It read like in I guess like a sensitive way as well around it. Like there's clear elements where the woman is defining like how even though he thinks the power is balanced, it can never be balanced, like within the culture and context, like historical context that they're living in. And it does like explore kind of interestingly how Irish people were treated and like lumped together with black people in terms of like jobs and things like later down the line. So I did like this quite a lot, but normally it's something I'm a little bit like icky about, I've got to say. But that is A More Perfect Union. I did like it, I did enjoy it. Feels like a good book club book. Then I have What Is Left of Me Is Yours. I don't want to say too much about this because this is way more like mystery slash like finding stuff out than I had expected it to be. But this is the book I've spoken about a few times, about the breaker-uppers in Japan. But I would class this as like fiction slash mystery, so I don't want to give away too much of the plot lines. I really liked it. I kept thinking I knew what was happening or knew what to think, and I didn't, but it was way more than what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be quite a cold depiction of this specific industry, and it really wasn't. It was quite a close family story with lots of complicated factors and emotions woven in, and yeah, I really like this one. I think I liked it more than I actually thought I was going to. Then the last one is The First Woman by Jennifer Nangziba Mukumbi, and this, like, I kind of feel like she must have written other things. She has. She's written a book called Kinto. This was so well done, like so well done. It is a coming of age story set in Uganda, stuffed full of folklore, feminism, and like lovely like child and teenage awkwardness, and you know, yeah, it was just like this like really cool coming of age story, and it felt so alive and real. And I think a lot of the time when I was reading it, I just felt like it could have just kept going. Like I almost felt like it could be a series and we just follow these people around forever. I enjoyed this one a lot more than I thought it was going to. I thought it was going to be good. I didn't know whether I was going to love it, and like coming of age isn't like necessarily like a buzzword for me, but I think this is just done so well. And the like folklore and feminism like woven it all into it. It was banging. I genuinely think this is such a good book. So that is all of the books. I've now talked to you about all of the books. So on the shortlist is, I'm just going to read from my phone, Antimatic for Homesickness, Inferno, which I really liked, just going to recap whether I really like them or not, My Darling from the Lions, The First Woman, Are We Home Yet, and Rainbow Milk, which I also really liked. I think the books were so strong, I would struggle to be like, oh, that's a terrible shortlist. I think whatever they were going to pick, it was still going to be a good shortlist. My favourites are definitely Inferno, The First Woman and Rainbow Milk. I gave 5 stars to each of those books. I really liked Antimatic for Homesickness too, but I think because I'm not as big of a poetry reader, that one maybe comes a little bit below some of the others. I think probably, this is going to be hard, I think probably my toss up between the winners would be Inferno and The First Woman. Gosh, it's really hard. I don't even know what I would judge them on. I would be thrilled if either one of those won. I think they're both amazing books. They really genuinely are. I think if I was going to actually pick the one that's going to win, I'm going to say I think that The First Woman is going to win. But the only one that I'd be like, oh well, would be Are We Home Yet if it won, only because I personally didn't connect with it. But that said, I've loved this prize reading. It's been so much fun. I'm so glad I decided to do both. Thank you to the person on Instagram who suggested the prize to me. I've loved it. You've made my reading year infinitely better with your wisdom. But yeah, I know I've had a few people say they've been interested in some of these books, hearing me talk about them, but I really do hope like there's probably some more people like me who just didn't know it was a thing, and maybe know about some of the bigger prizes but didn't know about this one, and I hope I've drawn you to some of them. It's been an absolute joy. I'll see you guys again soon in my next video, and look after yourselves until then. Bye!